Researchers in Australia have identified and mapped more than 380 suspected detention facilities in Xinjiang, that northwestern part of China where the government has interned hundreds of thousands, possibly more than 1 million Muslim minorities, including the Uighurs. That's 100 more facilities than previously known, and they used satellite images to build their database. One trend has stood out. The Communist Party is building more high-security prisons and decommissioning the lower security ones. In other words, in the last 3 years, they've doubled down on this crackdown despite growing international pressure. And what's happening directly contradicts Beijing's narrative. China first tried to deny the existence of camps, then it said most people in there have returned home, and now with these latest revelations, this is what the Chinese Foreign Ministry said.
So-called detention camps have never existed in Xinjiang. We have repeatedly responded to various China-related reports fabricated by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
Joining us is Nathan Rooster of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, the think tank that made these discoveries and tracked these changes. Nathan, tell us more about what you found.
Hey, Melissa, thanks for having me. Basically, what we've found is an extensive detention regime that stretches across the whole of Xinjiang and is very enduring and very permanent in its nature. We found that 60 camps in the last year or so have seen considerable construction, and there are a number that are still sort of under construction today.
And in the last few hours, you guys have also released some new information about the systemic destruction of mosques there as well. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so we actually wanted to focus and try to get a quantified number of how many, an estimate at least, of how many mosques in Xinjiang have been destroyed under this policy. So we set out to find as many mosques as we could, as many mosques as possible before 2017. As a part of this, we found about 600 mosques of varying across Xinjiang. And of all of those, we sort of looked at them and assessed their current condition. And we found that about a third of them had been demolished and about a third of them had been damaged. So in all, we found that about 16,000 mosques in Xinjiang had either been damaged or destroyed as part of this systematic campaign of cultural erasure in Xinjiang that has mostly been launched since 2017.
Now, looking through these satellite images, spending hours trying to determine whether what you're seeing is a place that's meant to imprison people or not, what goes through your mind and how do you feel?
So a lot of it, honestly, is just scouring satellite imagery for hours and hours. So, for example, at the start of this project, we had about 100 facilities that we knew from primary source evidence, which is journalists or construction tenders, were actually detention facilities. And so looking at that, we built an idea of what these facilities looked like. We saw the 4 different tiers, the 4 different levels of securitization, and the re-education camps, the detention centers, and the prisons. Following that, with that sort of knowledge in hand, we were able to just scour satellite imagery for hours and hours and sort of pick out on a map all the facilities that looked and basically matched this profile. So we were aided in that, for example, by looking at the night satellite imagery that sort of showed these facilities popping up out of the desert, along with just a lot of high-resolution imagery, such as what you'd see in Google Earth. Honestly, what we were struck by was the scale and the enduring nature of all of these facilities, and the fact that this detention regime isn't something temporary. It's not re-education where they get released after 18 months, but it's a long-term strategy of detention. And in many ways, and for many people, it's just removing them from society because they were considered to be too dangerous or perhaps too Uyghur or non-Han.
Is there anything the world can do? I mean, the Chinese government has continued building more facilities, even as the international community has made more and more noise about these camps.
I think what we look at now is probably past the peak, in that it seems as though a decent number of people genuinely have been released into different levels of residential detention and forced labor programs. And that's not ideal, but it's better than them being detained in these prison systems. And I think the international pressure has had a lot to do with that. For the Chinese authorities, this needs to make economic sense in a way. And they're doing that through these forced labor programs and by manufacturing. And that relies on the rest of the world buying these products. So we hope that this research into the enduring nature and the sort of complete nature of this detention should teach Western companies and Western decision makers that basically buying products from Xinjiang and being complicit in this system of detention is not okay.
Nathan Rooser, thank you.